it's an interesting criticism coming from a libertarian. But the fact is, I think government has a role. I think Milton Friedman recognized that government has a role, and Hayek recognized it, which is why I'm saying they're not anarcho-capitalists. They're not.
No. No. Okay, so let's talk about this. So first of all, I really, really hate clickbait titles, and nothing against you, but you're literally the worst at posting clickbait titles. This happened the last time that we had a long. Right. This happened the last time we had this long discussion. This journalist says XYZ, and then you look at it, and that's not actually what is being said, right? So this says Goldman Sachs thinks the economy will recover faster with Biden in office. And it's talking a lot about Moody Analytics, and it's talking a lot about, well,
hold on.
It says our credit card.
Let me just stop you for 1 second. The reason I'm recording this because I'm intending to post this, on the group or whatever. And so I want other people to understand what we're talking about, right? So let me share my screen because they might not have context of what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen, and I purposely opened these tabs over here, and let me just go through them really quickly. So my approach is not necessarily about clickbait. I hate clickbait. I look for both sides of an issue, okay? My goal is to say, look, you're in an echo chamber where you think that enforcing private property rights is always the best thing for the economy, and you think Dems are always bad and socialism even worse. So what I'm saying is, here are the foremost capitalists, right? If you're going to go by authority, here is Goldman Sachs.
They are not capitalists. So I'm going to stop you there before we continue. This is the part that I'm trying to tell you about that I really don't want recorded because.
Okay, well, can we then skip it if you don't want to record it?
Well, can you just pause for a second, and we can come back to it. Can you just pause the recording for a second so I get into this?
I hope that pauses the. Crap. I don't know how to pause the. Oh wait, can I pause the recording? Hold on a second. Yes, pause recording. Okay. All right.
So
we're back. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of my main premises here that I'm going to bring up is that I think that a lot of these firms are going to specifically model against a Donald Trump presidency in favor of a Biden presidency, in so much as I think that because the Democrats have pushed higher amounts of regulation into the banking industry and limiting the banking competition, therefore they would prefer to have a Democrat president as well as a Democratic Senate as well as a Democrat House so that they can maintain more regulatory capture.
Okay, and I totally disagree with that premise. I think we'll agree on other things, but Donald Trump has been one of the best presidents for Goldman Sachs. I mean, literally, he hired the most Goldman Sachs people of anyone into the government. Talk about regulatory capture. He did this not just with banking. He put the biggest opponents of every agency in charge of that agency, like the energy department that's in charge of the nukes. The guy running it that he originally put in there had BS in animal husbandry, and he was on record saying that he wants to eliminate that agency and then admitted he doesn't know what it does. So Trump decided to put him in charge. And my point is, putting a surgeon in charge of housing is like the least problematic pick that he had. But my point is, going back to this, look at how many people he's put from Goldman Sachs. And this is from 2017. This is exactly during Trump's tenure. How can you tell me that Goldman Sachs doesn't like a Trump presidency? They've been benefiting so much and having their own people infiltrate every position in government under him. So I would take issue with, you would have to give me a little bit more proof that they wouldn't want a Trump continuation, because all he does is stuff the cabinet with Goldman Sachs employees. Why would they not want that?
Okay, so I think you have to take a step back from Trump's appointees and thinking about this from a regulatory and a law and compliance standpoint. So yes, Trump has given them, I guess you could say, unrivaled power to some extent in his administration, but I also don't think that this has substantiated what Goldman Sachs wants, which is to create more regulatory reform. So prior to Donald Trump becoming president, with under Obama, we had seen an increase in lending standards. We had seen an increase in things like, man, I had to pull up some of this. This is a lot to try to remember off the top of my head. No, get out of the
What's your overall sort of, like, what I've said was Goldman Sachs increased its influence on
Well,
this economy, right?
again, I don't think that it's necessarily Goldman Sachs per se. I think individuals within Goldman Sachs has probably increased their influence, but I don't think Goldman Sachs per se. So again, it's not about that. That's more along the lines of them capturing some political power, which is bad. And I'm not saying, again, I'm not here to defend Donald Trump as the greatest president ever. What I'm saying is, if you are a large bank or a large investment firm, you would still prefer, even if you're getting almost everything you want out of Donald Trump, you would still prefer to have Democrats in power, because they would still manage to increase the regulation, increase lending standards, which would reduce the Schumpeterian dynamics that I talked about earlier.
I hear you with the increasing the regulations and the barrier to entry for others, but check this out, okay? First of all, a few things. Donald Trump himself preferred Democrats. He was on record saying, when the Democrats are in power, the economy does better. He himself used to say that before he ran as a Republican, okay? So that's a little weird right there. Unless he's going to debate himself, okay? Clearly he flipped. The other thing—
Well, no, hold on, time out. No. So he didn't flip. No. The 1990s Democrat Party is the current Republican Party.
Okay, fine. If that's okay, but
policy-wise,
Clinton, presided over the dot-com boom, right? A lot of jobs were created. I don't think it's because of the president's policy. He helps to prevent bad things, but I don't think he really creates jobs. But Clinton had a Republican Congress. I think that combination of a Democrat president and a Republican Congress accomplishes so much. It cuts the deficit because the taxes aren't like, there's no handouts to the rich. There's no, tax breaks for the rich, which Bush did, right? And Reagan did. And the deficits skyrocketed because that trickled down, or whatever, supply side economics theory, which is the crux of what I want to talk about, really. The supply side, the Laffer curve, even Laffer himself said there's a point on the Laffer curve, at which point, right, things go downhill. But you're getting more revenues until you hit that point. So even Laffer would say that zero taxes is not the optimal amount either. My point is that using the public money, the federal government, to subsidize the economy should be done during a crisis, like in Keynesian stimulus. But when the economy is doing well, like it was doing when Trump took office, the longest bull run in history, and Republicans say that it's the slowest recovery, whatever, it's the longest, at least in modern history. It's been going well. He comes in, it continues to go well throughout the entire world, yeah? At that point, you're supposed to store up your dry powder, your bullets. You're supposed to raise taxes on someone or increase revenues, decrease the deficits like Obama did. Trump goes in there and he's a big spender with his casinos and everything. All he knows is, let's rev the engine, let's pour gas on the fire, gasoline, and let's get even more jobs. And then he basically gets the unemployment rate slightly more down, and he takes the credit for all of it. But in the meantime, the government before this pandemic was already trillions of dollars more into debt than it was before, and deficits skyrocketed back to being $1 million. I don't see those supply side policies as being good. And I just want to say this one last thing, and you can pick whatever you want to respond to, is that these agencies like Moody's, they have a reputation to uphold, and their incentives, their highest incentive is to be reliable and reputable. If they don't have that, right, they lose their main, like, raison d'etre, right? The point of, like, people trust them for this. So Moody's downgraded the America, the credit rating to AA from a AAA back when Congress couldn't raise a debt ceiling. And that brinksmanship led Moody's to do that. So why would Moody's do that, right? Sure, you're saying it could fit a model, and maybe it's trying to like do a self-fulfilling prophecy if it's a model, but like it also has to have an actual model that matches reality. And like in the reality, there was just like the nuclear doomsday clock, but much more quantitative. These guys said the USA ain't as stable as it was, therefore it's, and who does that help? It hurts people, but they have to be honest. So if they were honest here and they were warning that they were going to do this and then they did it, why is them doing it now? Why are you saying that now they are just being dishonest completely? You see what I'm saying?
Okay, well, so first off, I didn't say that they were being dishonest. I don't think any good statistician is dishonest. I think what they are is good with statistics. And
Lies, damn lies, and statistics. I just want to
God,
say
I fucking hate that quote. I wish that quote would have never been said and buried. No, if you're a good econometrician, you can look at some other econometricians and calling them out. It's just that people are gullible and will listen to anything so long as you say percentage or average.
I agree with that.
That's just the nature of the beast. And that goes back to what I was talking about quantile regression and why we shouldn't always look at what the mean says, because what the mean versus the median says might be significantly different, as well as what happens at the 90% and what happens at the 10%, right? So anyway, so there is a track record of Donald Trump deregulating the financial market, which needs to happen, which does promote stability in the banking and financial sector. So we can start off with that is a true thing. Second, come on now.
I was talking about supply side economics versus.
Hold on, I gotta put one of these up. They're dying, so I'm gonna have to switch them out between the two.
My point simply, I just wanted to sort of tie it all together and say, while you're looking for that, here's my overall point. There are ideas about how supply side economics can boost the economy. More tax cuts for the rich. Keep trying the same thing over and over again until finally it works, right? Definition of insanity, according to Einstein. Just like communists, maybe. On the other hand,
hold on. I just don't understand. So
yeah.
I didn't get to finish my point. Anyway, so
Yeah.
we'll jump into supply side real quick. So I'm not 100% sure exactly what your beef is with supply side. So all supply side says is that you have demand. Demand will almost always be there so long as there is supply, right? So I'll give you an example. We call this the theory of local non-satiation, right? So like if you had $100 and you could get 100 donuts for $100, that's great. You'd eat 100 donuts. But if you could get 101 donuts for $100, you would get 101 donuts for $100. Now, again, there is the law of diminishing marginal utility, which says like after 101 donuts, it stops being good. So, but the idea is that if you have a budget constraint at that edge of your budget constraint, you will maximize as much as possible. And the more you can get, the better you are off.
Well, that's the thing. First of all, it's a theory, which means that it's never been.
No, that's provable. We know that for a fact. That's human nature.
Well, hold on. You've only tested it within what's actually happened. Like you haven't tested it in the sense of like, hey, let's cut taxes to zero.
No. That's not what I'm saying. No, I'm not arguing with Art Laffer here. That's not the point. I agree with what Laffer said. Laffer was a supply side guy. And a lot of what he said is totally misconstrued by people on the right and the left because they just literally don't understand what he meant. That's what I was explaining.
What would you say that he meant in a nutshell?
Okay, so what he meant in a nutshell is basically what you said, but how he got to that conclusion is completely misleading. All right, so we have.
Are you using a napkin?
Yes, I am. All right. So, no.
Oh, I see. Ha ha ha.
Oh, okay. So anyway, so you have your curve, right? So you have your curve. So you just have a normal curve right down the middle. Boom, that's where it is. Now, that doesn't mean it's at 50%. That doesn't mean it's at 70%. It doesn't mean it's at 30%. What that means is you have two different things that you have to look at. You have to look at government taste for redistribution, and then you have to look at social tastes for taxation, right? So on that, on those preferences for the tastes, preferences, whatever you want to call it, depends on who your teacher is. So on your tastes for your population, you're going to have to find and derive their taste measurements. And that's similar to what you get.
Fine. I'm saying your model is calibrated here in the middle where things have happened.
Well, it's not even in the middle.
The
It's
things that have never happened, perfect communism or perfect anarcho-capitalism or whatever you want to say, zero tax versus a total government-controlled economy, right? Neither one of those things has happened unless you're going to talk about like ancient Egypt with the pyramids and the.
well, I mean, there's been perfect communism. It didn't last very long, not in like not in Russia or anything like that.
Communism was among the Native Americans. Some of the tribes had very low, yeah, and of course it didn't last because the Europeans gave them diseases, not because they collapsed economically. You know, obviously.
Well, that's a weird way to say that, but okay, sure. And then perfect capitalism.
They were decimated. And by the way, I don't want to get into it because we could go all over like the.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know why you keep bringing it up. That's ahistorical, and it's also nothing to do with the point. The point is that
Karl Marx and Engels were inspired by Native American. They
No,
were
they weren't.
inspired by accounts of Native Americans.
no, they were inspired by their hatred for people of color, and they wanted a way to like bash and like murder people. Like, and also Engels wanted to molest little children. It had like zero to do with the economic inefficiencies of the time.
I guess QAnon is right. Anyway.
Yeah, no, Engels was a child molester. I mean, he wrote specifically about one of the reasons for freedom of the people was so that he could have sex with children.
I'm not going to touch that one.
I don't think you should because it's pretty disgusting.
I will say though, I want to get back to what look, there's two senses in which you're talking about supply side economics. There's the narrow sense in which you seem to say that if you increase supply, if I get you correctly, right? Tell me if I'm misconstruing it, then the demand will increase to match the supply. That's the very narrow sort of set. The theory says that's it. There's nothing else. And I'm saying, of course, there's like the mainstream, just like socialism in a very narrow sense is how I understand it. It's collective ownership, right? But people use it in some broad sense where it can mean anything I don't like. So here, supply side economics is much broader. It basically always focuses on the upshot of like trickle down, they call it. Why do they call it trickle down? Because you asked me what's my beef with trickle down economics, right? The pejorative term. My beef with it is that as an entrepreneur, just to give you one example, I have never raised money from investors, right? By saying like, hey dude, are you there by the way? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Have you ever heard any entrepreneur raise money from investors by doing a pitch like this? Hey man, you know how your taxes were cut earlier this year, right? Right. So now you have more disposable income, right? Yeah. Could you like just give me some of that money into my company? Like, that's not why people fund enterprises and going concerns. They fund it when they see demand. What you're saying is demand is primary. If people on the bottom, regular Americans, many of them have disposable incomes, right? Then I can make a product and show traction. That's what venture capitalists want to see, traction, right? That's what angel investors want to see. And we all know that because they say that, they trumpet that from the rooftops. We want to see the hockey stick. Well, hockey stick ain't happening if no one can afford my products because they're barely surviving. So my whole thesis in this discussion was going to be redistribution of wealth, as counterintuitive it may be to anarcho-capitalists and to people who are fiscally conservative. But in fact, giving people money, like a UBI or whatever, and giving them the choice of what to spend it on is, in my opinion, a much more prosperous system. And by the way, a much more honest and just and peaceful society, which doesn't riot about their police force because they get to choose with their wallet a different police force. So my point is, single payer healthcare, school vouchers, police, all of it should be done either as a single payer system, right? So people get the voucher, they decide, I want this doctor, I want this school, I want this police department for my neighborhood, right? Or you give them money, which is like a voucher for everything, and then you trust them to allocate their own.
Yeah, well,
Said,
okay, so
yeah, so
okay,
that I think is the most efficient system.
yeah, so that's fundamentally flawed, and it has fundamentally nothing to do with what we're talking about here. So I'm gonna jump off onto this just because I think this is just an easier topic and one that I've actually studied and went into pretty in depth. First of all,
a few words about my trickle up economy versus the trickle down.
Yeah, no. So first of all, that's empirically untrue that works well. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let us suppose that the net effect of having a child is to lose $25,000, right? And the teenage girl with a self-serving bias assumes the net effect is minus $5,000. All right. So the net benefits thus far are negative, right? So she acts in a manner that most benefits her. So she won't get pregnant. Now, so if she's less likely to perform risky behavior, if government incentives change that, then she is more likely to move into risky behavior. So let's say that the government assistance offers $10,000 in relief. Now, remember, I already said that her self-serving bias assumes the net effect of negative $5,000.
Yeah.
The government assistance offers $10,000 in relief. Since she sees the total benefit of $5,000, she opts into more risky behavior because that now there is a net benefit.
What you're calling is called a moral hazard, right? It exists with any insurance.
No. Hold on. I'm not talking about moral hazards. This is specifically a judgmental bias based on a self-serving bias.
Wait, how is it different than a moral hazard under any insurance? If you're insured, you are more likely to take risks because
sure, that's an incentive problem. What I'm getting at is at the microist level, the individual bounded rationality that you're talking about. You're saying that if we just give all the people stuff, that it'll make them better.
Not only that, I'm going to say that
empirically untrue.
I'm actually going to make that stronger and say that letting people take risks, even when they're on the bottom, increases the welfare of society. Jan Koum was able to make WhatsApp because his family was on welfare.
Right.
J.K. Rowling was able to make Harry Potter because she was on welfare. My point simply is that
stop.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous for you to point out one person and be like, oh, look how great this person is.
No, I don't want to point out that person, just like I don't want to
stop talking.
Stop talking.
It's ridiculous to point out the one or two times that it works out well. We're talking about aggregate. Let's be Rawlsian here. Let's talk about increasing the overall utility of society.
Sure.
Right. That is not going to work. Many people,
right,
when given choices, make bad choices. This is just the reality of it. We know this through our own internal welfare mechanism that we've ran the studies. We've also done the behavioral economics portion of it that shows that people don't always act in accordance with rationality. And many times it's the poorest of people that act the most irrational, for lack of a better term.
I agree.
They act the most.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, I don't want to argue and debate you. First, I want to understand. I'm genuinely curious because on some levels I agree that poor people, they've shown, have like a lower effective IQ because they have to deal with so many things. But I can go into it, but that's exactly like playing with a small poker stack and not being able to take the right risk and paying lots of switching costs just to go to work. You got to pay more of your salary for the bus and so on.
I understand those poor economics. I understand those. Okay.
So I agree with you on those, but again, the UBI and the safety net reduces those. It doesn't increase.
Okay, so safety net. We're not talking about a safety net. We're not talking about that. You're specifically talking about redistribution.
Hold on. You said safety nets create a moral hazard because now you're not going to fall all the way to the floor And you're saying that's going to create more risky behavior. I'm saying that's good to create risky behavior, because the risky behavior is what it is.
Okay.
People taking risks is entrepreneurship. That is
Okay. So do you think it would be good to incentivize the financial sector to increase its risky behavior?
I'm saying to incentivize people on the bottom, not on the top.
Okay. Why would it be different?
Because when you and I'm saying this as a left libertarian, right? I am a libertarian, but I look at things. I criticize concentration of power, whether it's a state power or a corporate power or any other type, like Mark Zuckerberg online. So I'm an equal opportunity criticizer of. So once you've concentrated the power, you have a lot of responsibility. With great power, right, comes great responsibility. And the point is that yes, at that point you need the Glass-Steagall, you need the rules to be enforced. But when you have a small person that can barely affect anybody with their behavior, of course I want them to have more freedom and a safety net. I don't want them to be evicted. I want them to spend their time on actually studying science and maybe or economics and maybe become.
Yeah, but they're not going to. That's, again, you're making a lot of assumptions out of thin air. First of all, I actually have a friend of mine that's trying to join. He would love to get in on this chat.
Sure. Yeah.
But secondly, again, the empirical evidence shows that that's not going to be the case. There are cases where that happens. So first and foremost, just unlike most people, by the way, Jeremy, this is being recorded.
Jeremy, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Jeremy,
good. I'm sort of, this is recorded, this is being recorded so we could like post this on Facebook groups. So I don't have to say the same thing over and over and over. So we're having
cool.
a discussion. Yeah.
So this is Jeremy. I've worked with him a few times on a few different projects. So he is a monetary economist.
Cool.
And he's a beautiful, beautiful man with beautiful eyes.
I am.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeremy.
Okay, so I got my PhD from Clemson University in May of this year.
Mhm.
My primary field, well, I had two primaries, one in monetary economics and another one in economic growth and development. My research in monetary had to do with unconventional monetary policy. So like stuff with quantitative easing, various effects of quantitative easing, like real effects as far as like global spillovers of monetary policy, as well as various transmission mechanisms of monetary policy with primary focus on the risk channel of monetary policy. So how banks would be responding to monetary policy shocks via like risky lending behavior.
Do you know by any chance Warren Mosler? Have you heard of MMT?
Oh, modern monetary theory.
Yeah.
I actually just got done on a lecture for my money and banking class on how MMT is a not particularly good idea.
Yeah, there's different opinions. It's definitely heterodox.
Oh, very
I will
heterodox.
say, I had to deal a lot. So my background, let me just tell you my background quickly. Joe already knows. I studied computer science and mathematics. And I would say until I was supposed to do a PhD in mathematics, but I kind of dropped out of the PhD and got a master's. I went to NYU for basically applied math with the financial, slant, right?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so like I learned a lot about like pricing with Black-Scholes equations and stochastic, like basic stuff, right? That's used by quants. And I thought I'd be a quant, and then I realized it's boring for me. So I decided I'm going to build apps, and so I started my first company.
Cool. I'll tell you what. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try to expel these cats.
Oh, you got cats?
From,
Yeah, I see that.
because they're.
Those are the real geniuses, by the way. You'll never know, but after the dolphins of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the cats are the next.
right?
Yeah.
Very true.
Just not when you're trying to do stuff and they want to play.
That's right. They know that life is not about debates. Life is about playing and catching mice.
Pretty much. Well, to take George Carlin's prophetic words and change them just a little bit, life is just an endless series of cats.
Huh. Interesting.
Yes. You get one cat, it dies, you get a new one.
Yeah.
That's just a revolving door of cats.
I got to think about that one.
Yeah.
But okay, so real quick. So my background, mathematics. We were geeking out earlier about Joe's background. And then I got into building distributed systems. Okay, my first, I'd say a good 8 years in, I was building essentially an alternative to Facebook, because I don't like these, as I like to criticize capitalism. I'm a libertarian, but I'm a left libertarian, so I criticize any kind of concentration of power and
Yeah.
go into it. But my point is, privately owning a large thing, you're concentrating power in yourself. And I started a company, so I'm currently the king of my little company. But if it grows and becomes like Facebook, I hope that it will be not just run by me, and I'm not going to be like centrally planning everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm more of a right libertarian, but I still hate like centralization of power, like even in markets. Now, if it's like well earned because it's a superior product, that's a different conversation we can be having. But if
well earned, exactly, there we could have a difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And I will say that, just as a throwaway comment, that just because Jeff Bezos earned all this money, right, doesn't mean he's the best at figuring out how to spend $20 billion in the best possible way for society.
Very true.
Not better off. Yeah. So I separate those two, and you can make a moral argument one way or the other way. I can definitely argue that point, but I just want to.
I tend to avoid the moral arguments on that stuff with economics. To me, it's just, look, it is what it is. Like, if you can have some kind of like, prescriptive stuff going on, but I prefer more like descriptive forms of economics, like not like, well, it should be this or it should be that. I just tend to prefer to like, look, this is what it is. I support certain cases, and like I said, if you are the best producer, if you're the best provider of your product, like, Microsoft in the late 90s when they got hit with all the antitrust stuff. Granted, I was a little too young in the 90s to really know what the hell was going on. I was like, ooh, monopolies or something. But looking back, it was kind of a superior product at the time.
Well, Google right now got hit by Trump's Justice Department, same way. Yeah, look, I think everybody doesn't like concentrations of power, except if you work for the government and then you like your own concentration,
Or if, you run a massive company, you obviously want market share. Like, and one of my professors from undergrad made an excellent point, was that with the difference between economics and business is, when you study economics, you learn basically how to like design and understand policy to encourage competition. And when you're a business major, on the other hand, you learn how to discourage competition and gain as much market share for yourself as possible.
Exactly. I think Mark Zuckerberg had very good mentors, and I use that word ironically, because told him competition is for losers, right? He wrote that book, 0 to 1. Build a monopoly. That's Peter Thiel's like thesis as a VC. Okay. And he took that to heart. Peter Thiel, by the way, I don't know how that guy can call himself a libertarian when he made, Palantir, and he helps governments all over the place to do pre-crime. It's interesting.
So I don't know too much about him. Really, all I know is that he's a VC, and I love how he was the one that got outed, right, by like some tabloid magazine. And I think he bought the magazine and like shut it down or something. And I was like, dude, hell yeah. Like,
Blocker, I think, but he openly said like he regrets that women got suffrage, that they got the vote, because they tend to vote liberal. Yeah, like he literally.
Yeah, I agree with him on that.
What the fuck?
Well, you're not hearing. That's debate number 2 we're gonna have.
Yeah, I mean, there's no debate about that. Women vote left more often.
Women vote left. Nobody disagrees about that. He's saying that is bad. That leads to less prosperity for society, right?
I mean,
and my whole point actually in this debate,
if you take the assumption that if you buy the assumption that my position is correct, then you would also necessarily buy that secondary assumption, therefore it would be true.
Well, isn't it nice that your assumption is not correct, and therefore, women voting is not so bad after all?
I don't think you could openly just dismiss my position as being like, no, it's not correct. I mean, we haven't even parsed through that. What I'm saying is, in his own internal logic, and I guess you could say my own internal logic, that necessarily does deplete I guess you could say, the resources.
Well, my goal in this discussion is to disabuse you of that notion, or at least start to poke holes a little bit in that in that
Buddy, I've been going,
assurance that you think that
look,
redistribution is actually going to always and everywhere create.
I'm going to stop you there. I was
Yeah.
born and raised a communist. Okay. I was a communist until I was 23 years old.
Like Thomas Sowell or someone. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thomas Sowell was the reason why I stopped being a communist. Literally.
He gets you out of it. Well, look,
Yeah.
I don't know what his red pill was, honestly.
I worked for the government.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That'll do it. Yeah. Okay. Well, I worked for corporations, and I've seen how the sausage is made there, and I can tell you that I'm consistent, and I think Jeremy here as well agrees with me that there's diseconomies of scale too. There's concentrations of power can lead to a lot of negative externalities and problems, and you're just like creating, more of it. The question is America good or bad? The answer is yes, and more of it.
No. I think you highly don't understand my position. Like I said, one of my goals in life specifically is dealing in fraud and corruption at the corporate and governmental level. Like
when the two interact, you get some generally bad results. That's how you get
right.
coercive. I mean, that's how you get, honestly, it's some market monopolies and some coercive monopolies. That's how you get massive amounts of corruption in both the private and public sectors.
And even if you don't have any corruption, even when it works perfectly, like in China, I would say that they may have low corruption, but
no,
they're locking.
There's very high corruption in China.
Yeah, China on the transportation international. I think China is at it's in the bottom 50.
Yeah, that's an incredibly corrupt government.
Yeah, no, there's highly corrupt. And that's just their perception index. I actually think their barometer is even lower.
But regardless, I'm trying to say that even if they were not corrupt, if they were actually achieving things in concert, like the fascists in Italy, right? Fascio, like the bundle of sticks, right? That whole ideology of corporations and the state working together, right? Even if they succeeded, would that help people? Like as a libertarian, I would be really concerned, right? And skeptical that is the best way to advance society.
Absolutely not. It's definitely not the best way to advance society.
Yeah.
The government is specifically supposed to be a rule keeper for the business and to promote competition. The moment that it reduces competition, the government has stepped outside of its boundaries of its duties and therefore causes problems.
Exactly. So I think, Joe, we had a discussion back when we had a debate, I think our first debate ever, where I said, I think competition is good, but it's not the best system. I think collaborative systems are better. Collaboration, meaning like open source software, science, right? I can go on. There's like Wikipedia, and all these things have outcompeted their capitalist, or I should say competitive counterparts. So Wikipedia outcompeted Britannica and Carta and all the privately owned encyclopedias. Why? Because for the very reason that you've reduced the amount of private ownership on a large level. Bitcoin is not owned by anyone. And look what has happened. The web is not owned by anyone. Everyone owns their own little domain. And that has incentivized people with open source software and so on to, there's no restrictions on who can use what and mix and match. Ethereum right now is a big thing as well, mix and match. Science.
I got some issues with Bitcoin though. I'm going to say that right now. It's if you look at the volatility and the price of Bitcoin, it's okay. You might think it could serve as like a nice alternative currency to whatever fiat currency you've got in whatever country one happens to be in. The problem is it's so incredibly volatile relative to fiat currencies that, I mean, maybe there will be a change in the future. I don't know, but having done research on the volatility of Bitcoin, it's way more volatile than the dollar. I don't see it ever replacing the dollar. I don't see it replacing.
Well, volatility, first of all, is a function of liquidity and how much liquidity is in the market, and the fact that the market cap of Bitcoin is nothing compared to
Well, I mean, there's also, I mean, yes, I mean, there's like the volatility. I mean, yeah, it does come from that. Like if you, as a monetary economist, I'd look at that more as like a money supply thing, but there's also money demand that can drive the volatility.
So let's get back to what we're talking about, supply and demand. I just wanted to say, do you see the difference between privately owned buildings and housing cooperatives, right? We can all know the difference. The difference is, in a privately owned landlord building, there's one guy or one corporation that owns everything.
Yeah.
And the owners of that corporation don't live in the building. They usually are somewhere else. And when the corporation is owned by these external, guys, maybe it's publicly traded even, but it's always owned by these people who don't have a skin in the game. They're not living, they're not consuming, they're not on the demand side, right? What happens is that the incentives are not aligned.
So, well, I mean, they do have skin in the game because they want to keep it financially viable. They want to keep that business going. So their skin in the game is
skin in the game from either the supply or demand side. So I'll explain what I mean. Let's say you've got a housing cooperative, which people usually say is a demand side cooperative. So in other words, people consume, right? They consume housing. They use housing. Okay. So then if they are collectively owning the building, if there's a no pets policy, it's because most people want that. If the rents are raised, it's because there is a reason for that. It's not just because there's going to be a profit accruing to an external entity, okay? And the same thing can happen the other way when you have a factory that's owned by its own employees. That's a producer cooperative. So the producers are typically harmed by creative destruction, which is Schumpeter's, destruction. Yes, it helps consumers, but we need to make sure that we look at both sides. Yes, consumers are, of course, able to have cheaper cell phones, and a lot of stuff is great. But don't forget, these same consumers are human beings that need to earn the money in the first place, right, in order to spend on things like rent and food and so on. If everything was going down in price, that might be fine, but rent has increased. Childcare costs have increased and so on. So not everything is elastic this way. So the producers that band together and own the factory, they're not going to outsource their own jobs, and they're not going to automate their jobs and then give that surplus to some third party. No, they're going to share that surplus among themselves. And there's problems with socialism too. But to me, socialism, when I say socialism, I mean libertarian socialism. Nothing to do with the state, but the fact that the people living in the building own and run the building, and the people that work at the factory own and run the factory. That to me.
So there is one thing that you're not quite sort of including in this analysis. It's that so when you're talking about like the buildings, right, with rent, the owner of the building, well, yeah, they can theoretically charge whatever rent they want, but that rent is still, what they charge is still constrained by the demand curve. They can't price above the demand curve because then at that quantity, no one's going to want it, right? So they can't just charge whatever they want. And at the same time, if, okay, so, you own a building, you want to lease it out, let people live there, that generates a little income for you, that gives them somewhere to live. So that's sort of a mutually beneficial transaction going on, right? It's a mutually beneficial arrangement that they have, where you're going to want to not just charge enough. Basically, you want to charge like the highest possible price. They want to pay the lowest possible price, right? The market will determine what that actual like market clearing price is. Now, they also have skin in the game because if they just let their building fall into disrepair, well, they can't really charge higher rent anymore because, well, it's not like a nice place to live. So if they want to just charge low rent, that's fine, and let it fall into disrepair. But, if they want to maintain it, right, because there's sort of like a reputation that needs to be maintained by the market here. And in addition to that, wait, hold on, shit. Brain died for a second. Sorry. My Vyvanse wore off a couple hours ago. So they've still got skin in the game in that. And also what I think is sort of the most important part about this is if they own the building, they can basically set whatever policies they want, right? If they're like, you can only have 2 pets. Well, I mean, okay, that's, this place kind of only lets me have 2 pets. I've got more than 2 pets, but it only allows 2 pets. And, I don't personally like that, but if that's their choice, if that's the policy they set,
Mhm.
it's, you know, it is private property. There are property rights in the US. So I'm totally okay with that, even though, you know, it might not make me very happy. I understand that's their choice to make. And it's their,
It's also just to piggyback off, it's also just another secondary constraining function that you would have for the pricing mechanism, right? So if you want more pets, that's just an additional price to be added. So
yeah.
so if I want to go to an apartment, it's $800 with no pets, and then I want an apartment with pets, I have to pay an additional fee for that. So that's
Well,
just
yeah.
another way.
It's increasing the marginal cost,
See,
basically.
that I think,
So,
so I agree with everything you said in the market clearing cost and everything like that. I am not, look, that's the standard explanation that everyone gets in this country and in general, like it's obvious. What you're talking about is market competition or market discipline. Of course, everyone faces market discipline. Even the housing cooperative faces market discipline. Even a city that is run democratically and people vote for their mayor, etc., you know, has to compete for workers, right? New York City was debating whether to give Amazon tax breaks or not. There's competition at every level.
Well, hold on.
I'm getting rid of competition.
Total side note. Total side note. This I don't want to derail that too much, but total side note. I'm actually mildly against different counties and then public opportunity investments through government coercion and competition for tax breaks and tax cuts and like that. I'm actually
I'm against
mostly
it
against
too.
that.
I would like to see smaller structures. But just to be clear, when I say government, I'm not limiting it to the federal government or the
Oh, I
city.
know. That's what I said. I said that's why I made the distinction: local and other
Exactly.
county
just some
public.
governing body.
Some
Yeah, like,
governing body.
I'm
I
opposed
just
to that
want
in general.
but you agree that corporations are governed as well, right? By
Yeah. I mean, there is governance in the corporation by the, you know, like structure within the corporation.
exactly.
It's called
Exactly.
corporate
So like
governance.
my
Right.
whole thing as a libertarian of my type, right? Because I've given this a lot of thought. I've spent 10 years debating with people on the left and on the right and all kinds of political spectrum. And it's really cool. And at some point, you know, I just said it's really cool to be a left libertarian because you get to say all these things that you can totally defend. And people are like, what? Because I criticize capitalism. And not that capitalism is all bad, okay, or all good, but I'm realistic about it. And I was telling Joe, you know, that a lot of things, capitalism is a better system. We could take some competition, like the police. Police agencies should compete for business from neighborhoods.
Ooh, that's a bad idea. That's such a bad idea.
Okay, well, you just said you're an anarcho-capitalist. How can you?
I'm not an anarcho-capitalist at all.
You said you're
No.
a libertarian who's on the right.
I
Hold
would
on.
say I'm
So-
more authoritarian, right, than like libertarian economically speaking, yes. But I do believe that there is some authority that is to be maintained by the government. The government has a monopoly on violence. I have no problem with the government having a monopoly on violence.
Well,
And
hold on. I agree with you. And by the way, that libertarians often get the sort of thing of like, well, why don't you said, you know, that scene in Gangs of New York? I use that scene a lot to show,
yeah,
like the firefighters are all fighting each other instead of the fire, right? And my point is, but what if those firefighters could create a professional association like FINRA of broker dealers, right? Or like the AMA with the doctors. What if they could have a professional standards association that kicks them out as soon as they like violate the basic thing? Like if police goes and fights the other police, right? Then they
but how is that association funded?
Yeah, then it becomes regulatory
by all the
capture.
police together, by all the police agencies. It's their association, right?
So where's the funding from that coming from, though?
Oh, they're earning money from their customers, which are the neighborhoods.
So what happens if there is someone in the neighborhood who doesn't want to pay? What happens? Are they
No.
not under the jurisdiction of the police?
No. The reason the unit that hires the police is a neighborhood. Of course, there's a free rider problem if you have individuals hiring police. I'm saying the neighborhood can choose, okay, this police agency is escalating conflict. They're shooting people. So, but we won't riot. Why? Because we could just not renew our contract and we could just cancel and get another one that de-escalates and has these new policing techniques. Then we have innovation, right? Just like with schools. So I take your point. Violence is a special case. Violence is unlike everything else. And I often say myself that there should be a monopoly on violence, right?
Well, what happens if you don't live in a neighborhood? What happens if you just live like on your own? Like you just bought a plot of land that's not part of a subdivision.
Well, I guess the state.
What protection from the police do you have?
I guess the state would have state troopers.
So then there'd be a competition for the police would technically be competing among other police.
No.
Then
if you live by yourself, what is the role of police in general? Like if you live in the mountains, what is the police doing for you anyway?
They're protecting you.
How police job is not to protect people, by the way. That's not their job. Their job is to protect the criminal, the alleged criminal from a mob, right? To put them in jail and have due process for that person. That's the job of the.
If someone breaks into my house and I call the police, though, I'm like, yo, someone just broke in my house. Right. We'll just hold constant, the castle doctrine stuff, the right to self-defense, all that. We hold that constant, just sort of assume that, just hand wave that out of the situation for a minute. If somebody breaks into my house, right, I'm calling the police. If somebody vandalizes my property, I'm calling the police.
Think about this. In ancient Rome, if somebody broke into your house, right?
Yeah.
You could stab them, right, with a
Yeah.
sword. Okay. And ancient Rome didn't even prosecute you for doing things like that in self-defense. In fact, it didn't prosecute you for revenge killings even. You could go and shoot that person later, and ancient Rome would be like, yeah,
Okay, so here's the
So what
problem
happens
with
if you
living.
have a dead body in your house then? Who takes
I'm not
care
saying
of
it's
it?
a good system.
Hold
What
on,
I'm trying to say is, let's go back to, aren't conservatives, by the way, on the side of what I'm saying when they say that police, you need a gun and you need to protect yourself? Like,
Yeah, no, I'm actually in defense of the law of omerta here. That's what I was trying to say. Like I'm in defense of the law of omerta, but so I get what you're trying to say here, Greg. You're trying to say that increasing the competition within the system would benefit everybody, and it would be like much like charter schools and school vouchers. Let's just say that the government paid all organizations that ended up passing the mandatory test to create police forces. So and that the government would hand out all of these vouchers and say, hey, y'all can choose your police force. Now, first, here's a few problems that you're going to have. One, you cannot compete for resources in places that are going to be, I guess you could say, strictly speaking, differenced by enough area, by a spatial amount, right? So if I have a police force of 200 officers and I'm going to give you, let's say California. So I have San Diego, and then within San Diego, I have like 7 neighborhoods. Each of these neighborhoods are distanced far enough apart because they want mine, whereas my competition gets the one beside it. Then we get into the distance traveled and the difficulty that it has to deal with that, unless you're going to have just strictly one set of beat cops on that, which you can do that within the system. Therefore, that doesn't create solvency.
there's always going to be edge cases.
No. Hold on. This is strictly debate. This is pure debate. That doesn't have solvency for the issue because that can already be created within the system. 2, here's the secondary problem. All right. So once you get to a place that you have high levels of competition, that high level of competition is going to increase the incentives for police officers to do things that may poorly reflect those they're in competition with. Now, I don't think anybody here wants a group of armed individuals given rights per law to act out incentives that would necessarily cause harm to people such that it causes damage to another police force so that they can win the competition battle. That sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah, why are you explaining Antifa, Joe?
Right. Third.
Wait, hold on. Before you get to the third, I just want to say, I am not talking about the free market that right-wing libertarians talk about. Of course, there has to be rules. We set the rules, and one of the rules would be sabotage is penalized heavily.
Yeah, I know. Murder's penalized heavily and people murder every day. We're talking about how incentives
But less
create
than if it
reaction.
wasn't penalized, right?
Right. No. Incentives create things. This is just the way the world
I
works.
agree
If
with
you
you. I think
incentivize
we're
that,
saying the same thing.
it's going to happen. You can say that, oh, well, in my system, I would say that they get penalized for it. In the system now, cops get penalized for getting into the way of other investigations of other police forces. And they work together and they still manage to try to compete with each other. Now, imagine adding the additional incentives of actually competing for money and for
Well,
resources.
no, corruption.
Yeah, no.
Corruption is collusion. You're supposed to be competing fairly. You shouldn't be sabotaging other
Again, that's a nirvana fallacy. I'm telling you what the incentives will happen. I don't care about what would happen in a perfect world. I'm not modeling that. This is a perfect competition. This isn't just a basic theorem. This is reality.
This
Okay.
is funny because it's almost like I'm arguing for anarcho-capitalism.
Yeah, I know it. It's stupid. I don't know why you would do that.
I'm just trying to show you that I am, even though I'm a left libertarian, when I see capitalism having good solutions,
it's not. It's not a good solution.
So
I don't buy the solution in most things in capitalism, specifically because of the problem of incentives. Now, let me get to my third point, and you can.
You're the progressive here. I'm kidding, but you're the guy, the leftist here in this case, because
no. There is no bones about it. I am a traditional conservative. I am a right-wing authoritarian. Raw.
Yeah, Joe's more authoritarian than I am on this stuff.
But
libertarian, and you're a right-wing authoritarian, so we should basically disagree on most things.
Right. Okay. So on the third problem, becomes I guess you could say, an issue for detection.
Wait,
right?
Sorry, just one thing. You said you're a right-wing authoritarian. I don't want to let people get away with contradictions. So just clarify for me. You just said the government working with corporations or fascism, let's say, as an example, is bad.
Yes.
So
yeah, fascism is bad.
Fascism authoritarianism then.
What do you mean?
So he's economically right and socially authoritarian.
Socially, you're authoritarian.
Yeah, just like I am. I'm economic right, but I'm a little less socially authoritarian than Joe is, but I still would consider myself an authoritarian.
So I just want to be clear. I just want to understand this, right? What is your goal of being socially authoritarian? Is it in and of itself, you just like the state to be powerful, or do you want, there's a goal you're trying to reach, like family values or something?
I want order to be maintained.
Yeah. So first and foremost, order to be maintained. Second, I want So family values is a really weird one. That is something that I do want, but I think that is not produced by government. So this is my issue with libertarianism, right? So libertarianism assumes that the free market of ideas will create this perfection, this world of nirvana. Well, the best ideas will win out. I actually don't believe that. Just like I don't believe that happens
I'm not
competition.
enough to
Right.
Free markets do not solve all ills.
Struggle. Like you create Bitcoin and you think it's going to be decentralized, and then you get mining pools, right? You create Ethereum and there's always bugs, and people figure out ways to do flash loans and exploit things and contracts.
Right. So that's why I'm an authoritarian. I want to maintain competition as best as possible.
I don't think you are on a scale from 1 to 10. I think you're a 6.
1 second. I can't hear you.
Because what if I told you that right now China is locking up the Muslim populations, right? Like Uyghurs, and they're doing it because they're authoritarian. They want to maintain order. These people are not fitting in. They're a round peg in a square hole, right? Whatever. And the same thing they're doing to underground Christians. And I guess as a Christian, you might feel more sorry for the Christians, but they're also doing it to Tibetans, nationalists in Tibet. They're also doing it to Falun Dafa, Falun Gong, which is essentially a peaceful religion that is kooky, but has never really hurt anybody except themselves.
Okay, hold on. I didn't hear the first part of that. Who are these people oppressing?
The Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, what about, they're evil. And?
Wait, but I thought you liked order.
Right, but
I'm
order,
just-
okay, hold on. Okay, so just think of it as an equation, right? So let's say we're trying to maximize order, right? But we
Okay.
have a constraining function. That constraining function is the difference between like me, a fascist, and then like a communist dictatorship. So like my constraining function is significantly different than theirs. Like I want competition. I want a promotion of free ideas. I just also want those to be constrained because I don't think those are perfect, right?
So if
So I
someone
want,
says, I want to have a social credit system where we're going to maintain order by gently nudging people instead of going to jail like Americans are incarcerating tons
yeah.
of people.
I'm actually really suspicious of nudges. I actually think I think nudges are like bordering on immoral. This is something that Richard Thaler had talked about. Like after he had done all of his work, he was like, you know what? I kind of feel bad because this has created what you could consider, I think he called it the libertarian. I thought, God, what was it? It was something like the libertarian authoritarian world was like how to control people through nudging and like how this is
Well, so
immoral for
you
the
actually on the
libertarian.
side of libertarianism here. You're saying, look, you don't want chilling effects. You'd rather people make the mistake. For example, you'd rather have people. There's no speed limits on the highway. They'd rather just have them run at whatever speed. But once they crash to someone, then they get sued or die or whatever. But like, you're not going to restrain them at all before, is what you're saying.
No, I mean I'm not getting he's saying that at all. Actually, what I'm getting he's saying is like it basically if you violate the law, you should be punished for how that like accordingly with how you violate the law. Like I mean, if you're speeding, going whatever speed you want, I mean theoretically, yeah, you can go whatever speed you want. Doesn't mean the law is going to let you do it. Like if you get caught, yeah, you're kind of screwed. If you're speeding, you get caught speeding, you should get a ticket.
Yeah,
Like
I am as a libertarian, let's say, I question the law itself, and I'm trying to say maybe the law could be made better. And by the way, private property to me is just it's just a consequence of laws. In one jurisdiction, you might have adverse possession laws. In other jurisdictions, you have adverse possession laws that are for 5 years versus 30 years. Sometimes you have statutory rape that's 18 years. Sometimes it's 15 years. Sometimes there is nothing. So my point is this, that laws are just a product of people's this decision to codify here in this jurisdiction, it's this and that. So private property to me is not a natural right. It is when it's one person and their chattel property, like my phone, right? But as I get into like owning one house, 10 houses, 100 houses, 1,000 houses, at some point, I would like the society, and this is the key, to stop enforcing that amount of private property. So when I take a court, when I'm squatting in a house or I can't pay my rent, and a landlord owns 1,000 or a company owns 10,000 houses, and I'm number 625, I want the court to be more on my side and be much more.
It is.
Yeah.
It's already a
but
thing.
why should it be though? Is the big question. Why should it be?
Well,
Because-
they've already written the moral standards into law. Law is, I mean, you can read Richard Posner. He's an economist and prior to 2016, he was actually a really great district judge.
Oh.
Richard Posner. He talked about why law is written, that it's based on, I guess you could say, common sense principles of interactions with
It is
individuals.
supposedly the guy who argued with that animal rights guy.
I have no idea.
Okay, there
I
was
have
an,
no idea.
wait, that was an interesting question that Jeremy had. Why? So you can answer it two ways. One is the moral way, which is you could talk about morality and disagree or agree with that. That's an interesting question about moral realism. And then there's the consequences, the utilitarian consequences. So the whole point of this discussion originally, right, Joe, was that I am saying the less private property is enforced on large scales. Obviously, if someone steals my phone, that's a different story. But if I have 1 million phones and someone takes a phone, I'm saying it should be a gradual curve down, where at some point I'm just not taking the case. I'm just throwing it up. my contention is, in a society, and here I'm sharing my screen, where people are not being evicted, and private property rights of landlords take a back seat to people keeping their homes, which is what Trump proudly says, I'm protecting people from evictions. Landlords are suing him. And my point is, he is violating private property. And if it was Obama or Bernie Sanders, people would say this guy's a socialist. What is he, but here's the point.
It's also a state dependent policy, though, is the thing, because with COVID, right, where most of the economies are shut down, there's a little bit of a problem there, right? If the economy is not in a recession, there are not forced government like imposed lockdowns, and someone says, I want to protect people from evictions, that's a very different case than when you're in a recession as a result of government enforced lockdowns.
I agree.
And that's also an
It's
efficiency
hard to
argument.
say that the government should have acted differently, let people die from the virus instead, and therefore now they hold responsibility. It's an interesting argument, but I think it's dubious because the government had to act. If the one thing that the government should do is to protect the people, what if it was a more killer virus? What if the virus had a 10%?
No one is saying that, Greg, you have this really bad idea of like strawmanning the shit out of people, man. I hate to break it to you. Nobody said that. I don't know why I am not Nelson. I am not Kim. I am not these guys that you argue with on Call Out. I have won debate tournaments. I have traveled around the United States debating. I've worked in academic settings. I have done all kinds of stuff, dude. Like, stop it. Not saying that.
Okay, dude, but I think Jeremy,
That's not what he was saying at all. No, he's saying that you cannot make the argument at that equilibrium about like Donald Trump being wrong because there is obviously a secondary set of factors. Those constraining factors change the way people think about it.
Okay, so let me be clear.
Actually, for a mathematician, here's a good way to put it, right? The various policies should be acted in certain cases where they shouldn't be, or like, wow, that came out really badly. Various policies should be enacted in some cases and not in others. You can sort of think of it as if you were to model the economy in a dynamic framework, it has non-linearities, right? So there are like these systems of equations are non-linear in parameters, right? So if they're non-linear, well, I mean, that could be in a number of cases, right? It could follow like some sort of like, quadratic something or other. It could also have cases where there's structural breaks, right? If there's a structural break, a policy on one end of that break might be necessary and might be helpful, whereas that policy on the other end of that structural break would actually do more harm.
So I just want to say, but I agree with you. And I think Keynes was right that you have to do stimulus when things are bad.
In certain cases, you do. Keynes got a lot wrong because mathematically, I mean, the tools just weren't that well developed yet. And so I think if Keynes had access to the mathematics that exist now in economics, he would have much different conclusions from his research, and he would go more along like a new Keynesian framework.
But I do want to say, it wasn't the straw man, Joe. Jeremy kind of threw out a red herring right at the end, which I took and ran with because it was the last thing he said. And I thought that's what you said, Jeremy, is that, well, in this case, it's different because people are hurting. And if you had left it there, I would have said, yeah, I agree. And that's why Keynesianism is important during at least downturns. But then you also said they're hurting because the government is the one, not a hurricane, not a virus. The government is the one that told people not to work.
Yes.
Yeah, it's basically government imposed externality. And you should be compensated.
So so it's not a straw man. It is what you said.
Right, but no. What you're saying is no. So his argument isn't on the imposition that it is a government enforcement. He's saying that is the externality, regardless of the implications of that argument. That is the externality that is causing it. Your counter argument was to argue against the imposition, not the argument itself. That's why it's a straw man, because you're attacking a section of his argument, not his argument entirely. And it wasn't even an argument. It was just a basic contention.
By the way, attacking a
fact.
section is not a straw man. A straw man is attacking something completely different.
No. Again, listen to me. A straw man is a logical fallacy where someone presents you with argument A, but you argue against argument B. Straw mans can be broke down into numerous different types of logical fallacies within the overall term of straw man. In those, it is to say, this is argument A1, A2, A3 based upon argument A. So instead of attacking argument A based on proposition 1, 2, 3, which is why when you listen to debaters, they'll be like, this is argument 1, and this is why I'm going into it. So as I'm going into argument 1, I'm going to go into section A. With section A, we're going to go into this. And instead of
I know that's what you
following
did
up,
with my debate.
yeah, spreading is stupid, but I had to do it a little bit. So when you only attack in argument 1, part A, and leave B and C.
Well, no, you cut me off. I was gonna see. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not that I'm straw manning, man. I'm always trying to be fair and try to. I can only speak linearly. I can't have a multi. You know, I can only speak with one voice. Okay, so the first thing I have to choose what I'm going to say first. Jeremy said, "Well, this is different because now people are in a downturn because the government." Told them not to work. So I could do one of two things. I could either agree with them and say, yeah, they're in a downturn, and I don't care why they're in a downturn. We've got to stop evictions because millions of people homeless or moving and wasting resources is not better for the economy. It's better to put a moratorium on eviction. And
right, which is the argument. So just so we're clear, that was the discussion. That's the argument.
Right,
The
but then he
secondary
said a red herring. He said a red herring.
It's not a red herring. It's an imposition on the basis of an externality brought into the argument.
Look,
Yeah, when the government shuts things down, it imposes an externality when basically the government shuts stuff down to try to control the spread of the virus. Right. That was the intended goal. Now, a sort of unintended consequence of that is a lot of businesses fail. A lot of people lose their jobs. Income just dries up. And now it becomes a question of, okay, do I allow these people to get evicted from their homes, or do I put in place some sort of protections to stop people from getting evicted? Now, it also comes down to, how is the government going to do that? Is it just going to say, it doesn't matter if they can or can't pay, you can't kick them out, which then fucks the landlord over entirely? Or is it going to be something along the lines of like, well, okay, you can't kick them out, and we'll at least help the landlord a little bit, because I mean, if the renter's income dries up, they can't pay the landlord, well, then the landlord's income dries up.
Yeah, so there's so much to like unpack here. I just want to just quickly spend on each thing. First of all, you've said that there's a downturn, and then you've said the downturn is as a result of government specifically acting to counteract the virus. And it's just like the government has responsibility now. Just like we invaded Libya and then we left, we didn't do anything, and now it's a failed state, and we're like, peace out. So yeah, I agree that like we have a responsibility once we start doing something. I was responding to that principle when Joe said I was attacking a straw man. I could have, you said A and B, or A because of B. So I started with B. And that's not a straw man. That's just starting with something. That's what I'm trying to say, Joe.
You have fucked that logic up. No, dude, listen. When a debater gives you a content, let's say I have a 3 argument based proposal for my policy, right? So I have 3 arguments. Within that argument, I have part A, part B, and part C, right? So that's argument 1, part A, part B, part C. Argument 2, part A, part B, part C. Argument 3, part A, part B, part C. Now, if I am presenting argument 1 or argument A, whatever you want to call it, argument 1.
Right, I'm there.
And under that, I go into A, B, and C. And instead of retaliating on argument 1, you only retaliate on argument A. You were building a straw man by choosing what you perceive to be the weakest argument
Not to be
built
pedantic, but
into
all
it.
I'm saying to you, Joe, is that when you cut me off as I'm just responding to one part of the argument, I've chosen to start there, and you've cut me off and said, "Oh, this is a straw man." That's
Because it's
you haven't let me
irrelevant and it's
finish.
not useful to the conversation, man. I'm trying to keep you on track because, bro, look, I
I
respect
would
you.
have
You're
gotten
willing to
around
go out
to
here.
the
No,
whole
listen,
argument.
listen to me.
Yeah.
I respect you. You're willing to go out there. I may disagree with you. I may think you're an asshat on Facebook, but face to face, I think you're a decent person. I truly do.
Are you an asshat on Facebook?
Yes, he is an asshat on Facebook.
I am
He's
not an
fucking
asshat on
annoying.
Facebook, but I'm just nice and
But
great.
not as bad as me. Not as bad. I'm probably worse, but that's because I hate everybody. But that's because who I am.
I should get a hat that says ass on it. Then it can
Yeah.
have an ass hat.
Right. But what I'm getting at is you have a knack for going into like tangential topics and
Yeah, okay.
like
I agree with that.
and so all I'm doing is I'm calling it a straw man, but really what I'm doing is trying to snap your ass back into the conversation and stop following trails.
So let me then focus
Like
on the
you-
main. Fine. Let me snap back to the point of this debate or this discussion. And Jeremy, you could totally participate on whatever side or just say whatever you actually think. Okay.
Yeah.
I contend that a society that redistributes its wealth continuously as a UBI or as a universal health insurance or a set of single payer things like what I said, every neighborhood has vouchers that they can spend on police, schools, whatever. The money is unconditionally given to the people. That sort of society with protections like bankruptcy protections and limited liability, and in this case, stopping evictions, will be more resilient and be more prosperous in good times and bad times than a society that is like Ireland during the potato famine, where the landlord said, "Well, tough luck. You can't eat. You still got to pay your landlord, and you got to work to the bone and drop dead." And like debtors' prisons, where they say, "Well, you can't pay. Too bad. There's no bankruptcy protection for you. There's no limited liability." A society that has these things is not just more compassionate, but just on a purely economic outcome level, is more prosperous because people aren't wasting their time doing bull crap.
I mean, yeah, there's an argument for economic, like increases in economic efficiency, should there be some degree of a social safety net. Like, I'm not going to say that there's absolutely no chance that there would be like no welfare gains from that. Like, there probably are some welfare gains from a social safety net. So to an extent, yeah, I can't argue that. Now, the question then just becomes, okay, how much do we, how large is that net? Like, I mean, I'm not opposed to a UBI. I actually kind of liked Andrew Yang's proposal with like the $1,000 a month if you sign up, because I mean, really, in a lot of ways, it can also just massively simplify the public finance like problem that we currently have.
Believe it or not, I know
Where
Andrew Yang actually.
if you signed up for Yang's plan, right, you got your $1,000 a month, you would forego all other forms of government assistance.
I just
Now,
say
the
that
nice thing about that is if you forego government assist, like all that other assistance, this plan, this $1,000 a month plan, right, is irrespective of income. It doesn't matter how much you make. You want to sign up for it, you sign up for it. You just forego assistance, right? So let's assume that you are someone who's on the margin of one tax bracket to the next, right? So you're like right at the poverty line. Now, if you earn a couple dollars more, you go into the next tax bracket. If you earn, say, even 10 more dollars, you might lose $10,000 in assistance from the government. So in that case, right, there's no incentive to produce a little bit more, to make a little bit more.
it's a
Because as soon as you
discontinuity.
do, you're kicked off all this assistance that you were getting that was keeping you going. And that extra $10 isn't going to offset the loss in $10,000 that you got. Under Yang's plan, that margin is now, like, if you're at that margin, well, that it's just removed, right? That's a non-binding constraint anymore. So you can produce more if you do that, because no matter how much you make, you still get that additional $1,000 a month.
Oh,
Now,
I
it's
totally
not-
agree. And I was so happy to
I disagree.
there. Well, yeah, first I just want to say a couple words. In 2018, I met Andrew Yang because my friends, including Matthew, who's against UBI, He's like, Greg, you're constantly talking about UBI. There's a guy running for president for UBI. I'm like, really? Yeah, he's in New York. He's in your city. So it took me about 2 months, but I finally got on his radar and he invited me. And back then they had like 3 people in the
Yeah.
campaign. So I got lucky. I met him. And then we talked about building an app for the Andrew Yang campaign. Of course, since I build apps for communities, this was my first political campaign that I ever built an app towards. You know, it was like, here we've got knocking on doors, organizing, like all this stuff is done using our application. Okay. So not to toot my own horn, but point is, I'm a big fan of UBI because it represents freedom, consumer choice, right? But I would even say that we eventually should be putting more than $1,000 a month on UBI. Why? Because all the roads and contractors and police and firefighters and schools adds up to a lot more, and it's being given to every citizen already. So I'd rather
citizens that want it.
Well, yeah, but you can't really opt out of paying for roads or
I have
paying.
a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about the problem of this incentivizing more risky behavior from those who have more to lose than everyone else?
Well, like I said,
How is that
I
not a
think
moral
risky
conundrum?
behavior is a positive thing, not a negative thing.
I
On the bottom.
disagree. I don't think the increase in risky behavior is a good thing. Increase in risky behavior leads to things like an increased teen pregnancy. So one of the great things that the government has done is disincentivize teen pregnancy through a numerous set of programs, which has overall reduced the impact of teen pregnancies.
Do you know what
As I was
reduces
stating
teen
earlier.
pregnancy but do you know where teen pregnancy is reduced the most? 2 factors. One, when there's less poverty and more safety nets, people have less pregnancy.
That's not true. That's not true. There's nothing. Okay, so first of all, any academic study you look at that uses poverty as either the dependent variable or looking at it through as the independent variable, it's probably crap. Poverty is a very, very bad variable to use in general. I tried to use it a couple times.
It's measurable. It's measurable. We agree on that. You can measure.
It's measurable, but it's poor. It's a poor measurement. It's just like the income inequality, the Gini coefficient. It's really, really hard to measure that very
it's not well.
well.
To measure if a person is below the poverty level.
No. So like, let's say you're doing like city by city measurements to evaluate teen pregnancy, right? And so you're like, all right, so I'm going to say that all cities that have like a
well, can I
GDP
just
per
tell
capita.
you 3? See, that's the thing. I start with 1 and you cut me off. Let me just say 2 or 3 factors.
Okay, go ahead.
1 is religion. If you don't use condom, I often say if the condoms are off, the religion doesn't matter. In other words, it could be Muslim, Catholic, whatever. You're going to have the same number of kids probably, regardless of your religion, if you don't use condoms. So contraception, 1. Number 2, when people, poverty, you're right. Poverty is a double-edged sword because if real estate is high, in a city, real estate is very expensive. You need to afford an apartment because in the 20th century, there's now this new norm, 21st century, that you should have your own place. Well, you should have your own place, meaning it should be an impressive place, not just a shoebox. So you spend, as a man, a bunch of years trying to make that money to have that place. While the woman, and here's the third factor, and it's probably the biggest one, you can see it in Africa a lot, is right now, number of children per person is going down. Why? Because the women are getting education. So again, schooling, which is freely redistributed to everybody, actually decreases, not increases, the amount of children that women have. So it's not so clear cut that giving people free stuff is going to get more children.
Okay, so can I respond to that?
Yeah.
First, religion, that's entirely incorrect. I don't know how you come to that conclusion. In fact, religious areas tend to have the lowest amounts of teen pregnancies in general. We've done this through spatial regression studies, looking at distances, looking at the distances to churches and church outreach groups. The increased magnitude of church out group work has a measurable impact on teen pregnancies.
Hold on, 1 second. I disagree in 2 ways.
Well,
One, you're only looking at the United States and the Protestant Christians.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
talking
that's what I'm
about,
talking
look at
about.
the Muslim
I
countries.
don't care about Muslim countries.
Well, you
Not
may
what we're
not
talking
care,
about. We're talking about applying this to America, man. We're
Okay, well, I'm
specifically
not.
talking about America.
I'm talking about general economic principles, right?
Yeah, there's no such thing as global general economic principles.
Dude, religion is a huge factor, and belief system. People in Africa believe that they still need a lot of children to help with the farming. People in millions and hundreds of millions of people live in Muslim countries where they do have child pregnancies. They have child brides for crying out loud, some of them.
Listen to me.
And in India, you have caste rapes and many other things.
Stop. We're
I'm
not
just thinking
talking about
it's
that.
not true that religion doesn't matter. Religion plays a huge role.
We're talking about the United States. We're talking about the implementation of UBI. We're talking about an independent reference or a reference dependent utility function that
Fine,
we
let's
can use to
let's
model.
take religion out of it because, fine, the United States has statutory rape laws. The United States has.
Oh my God, that has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it.
What do you
Listen to
mean?
me. Listen to me. I'm
Of course
trying to
you
make this as simple as possible. I'm really trying to not be a prick here.
Right.
The empirical evaluation of it shows that an increase in religious output, the magnitude of an outgroup work, has a significant impact in reducing teen pregnancy
in the
in
United
America. I don't care about other countries. We're specifically talking about the
So like
incentive
South
structure.
America and the fact that Catholics don't use condoms, that might
Again,
discourage, doesn't matter to you
we're
because they're Protestants here, right?
We're talking about the implementation of incentive structures through government policy in the United States. I don't care about other countries. If you want to have a conversation about global economics, we can have that, but that's not the
Okay,
conversation right
forget
now.
religion. Move on
Okay.
to the next one, women's education.
Okay, no, the next one is poverty. So you
Okay.
never let me finish this. So one of the problems with poverty and one of the problems with income inequality is that it's very static. It doesn't change much. So whenever you do any type of assignments for this, you're getting a lot of within, or you're getting a lot of between variation, but you're not getting a lot of within variation. So that's the first problem. That's really hard to deal with. Trust me, I know that's hard to deal with econometrically. Second, it's really hard for you to find enough information to actually validate these beliefs, right? So like if you did poverty in North Carolina and use the same poverty standard in New York, you're going to get some vastly different numbers, right? That's because the purchasing power is different between these two countries or these two states. And this goes within state, it changes as well. So there's a lot of, variation that has to be accounted for there. And that's very hard. It's econometrically fucking difficult to deal with poverty or income inequality. And that's why a lot of these papers that find a lot of the significance, a lot of
It's not hard
built into
to
the
look.
module.
What I'm saying is very mainstream correlations. When
But
women,
it's, and I'm telling you that a lot of it's wrong. And I'm telling you a lot of it's wrong because a lot of these people are punching out papers just to prove a point without actually worrying about the legwork that they've done. I'm telling you, Jeremy.
This has
Yeah.
been as proven as anything in statistics has been.
No, Jeremy, as
Yeah.
an econometrician,
Yeah.
when you're setting up a study and you're on the publish to perish, how often do you think theoretical considerations come into play versus econometric significance in a publish to perish?
It depends, honestly. In some cases, it doesn't matter. In other cases, it does. If it's like a low to mid-tier school, maybe. But at the end of the day, the publish or perish thing, like for a better research school, doesn't just want publications. They want publications in high quality journals.
Right.
The high quality journals are going to hold it to a standard of not just are you controlling for these things, like are you doing nice econometrics, but it's also going to go, is this consistent with the underlying economic theory?
Okay. Now, let me get to my second part. Do you agree that there is a significant amount of, I guess you could say, statistical hand wagging when it comes to portions of economic theory, such as the problems in such as the econometric problems dealing with poverty, as I stated, about the issues about the within and between effects that most economists do not solve for. So I'll give you an example. A lot of the papers that you'll find on corruption and income inequality, they will find statistical significance for corruption and income inequality for bidirectional causality. Now, the issue is that all you're doing is you're picking up the between difference, but that doesn't say anything about the within difference on all of these countries. Now, can you make a causal inference from between? No.
No, but here's within. Within Ethiopia, we could see over time more schooling.
Right.
less children.
Okay. I haven't got to women's education. Hold on. I haven't got to that. I'm just explaining the statistical problems with using income inequality and poverty, because you have such a difficult time in dealing with within and between estimations, right? So that's your fixed effects versus your random effects. It is difficult for you to deal with. And so a lot of researchers, they will publish papers using just basic 2 states least squared, 3 states least squared, stuff like that. And a lot of these are the ones that get pushed out. And that's not saying that the top journals and all the best stuff are done like this. That's not what I'm saying. But if you go on Google Scholar, I don't necessarily think you're going to get the most cutting edge stuff.
Yeah.
And that's because a lot of it's
around the edges. Oh, okay.
Yes, you're completely right. I will talk to you about that offline, Jeremy, but you're 100% right.
Yes, Robert, if you want to look up this stuff on the effect of schooling, especially with fertility rates, secular fertility declines, anything kind of related to that stuff in the growth and development literature, Robert Tamura is like one of the leading guys.
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's
I'd
also
love to do that.
yeah.
I just want to say, to me, I'm not nitpicking one study or one methodology or whatever. I'm looking at overall, think of it like a meta study, and I get the sense, I haven't seen anything to the contrary, that anything serious to the contrary. The more women get educated, obviously, the more time they spend in college, the more they want to have a career or whatever, the less they get teenage pregnancy, because they.
And I wasn't going to disagree with you on that.
Well, there's an identification problem there. There's a major identification problem there.
Go ahead.
So there's the human capital accumulation thing, yes. But I'll tell you what, you guys keep going. Let me try to figure out exactly how I'm going to put this into words.
So what I was going to say, now let me respond to that, because I haven't really got to respond to that. I really wanted to make sure that you kind of understood where I was coming from about the poverty and income inequality, because that specifically is my area of study, corruption and income inequality.
Have you ever read Progress and Poverty, by the way? I'm just curious, of Henry George?
No.
Okay. The reason, just small aside, in the 19th century, this was the most respected book. Milton Friedman in the 20th century loved it. It has a who's who of like Leo Tolstoy recommended it, Milton Friedman, a bunch of US presidents. It's fallen out of, it's so interesting because this was the most popular economics book in the 19th century, bar none. And then Progress and Poverty was exactly that question. How come there's so much progress and poverty still exists? And Henry George talked about the land tax. You probably have heard about that, Georgism, the land tax. He said there should be only one tax, the tax on the unimproved use of land. And you just pay a flat tax and you can see who's renting the land. Anyway, I was just curious, because if this is your focus and your expertise, you should definitely read the most popular book on this topic in the 19th century that everyone, including Milton Friedman and Hayek, respected. So just, I'll throw it later in the.
So click that link with Robert Tamura that your mouse is on.
Sure. I have a copy of Progress and Poverty somewhere.
Yeah,
Get his CV, his Vita.
Yeah, where is that? Oh, okay.
And scroll down to working papers.
This guy's like Leslie Lamport, huh? For distributed systems. Let's see. Okay. Honors, fellowships, grants, teaching experience, publications. This? No?
Yeah, keep going.
Other publications. Working papers.
Going. Working papers.
Okay. Let's see what's relevant here.
Look
all
at the
of
third
it.
one.
Yeah. Okay. It's all about education dynamics. Okay. Got it.
was about to say, just so you know, this man, Robert Tamura, is he's the man. He's the
Yeah,
man.
he's a fucking beast.
Him, AC Moglu. By the way, Jeremy, is Tamura a neo-institutionalist?
Neo-institutionalist.
Like AC Moglu is a neo-institutionalist. I didn't know if Tamura was.
What is that? I don't know what it is.
Hold on. I'm gonna have to explain. This is difficult.
I mean, he basically worships Asamoglu's model of directed technological change.
Is he Japanese? Is this the
Of
more guy?
Japanese descent. He's American, but
All right.
So, neo-institutionalism is a methodological approach in the study of political science, economics, and organizational behavior and sociology in the United States that explores how institutional structures, rules, norms, and cultures constrain the choices
Here we go. Okay, I just want to say your guy, Tamura.
and actions of individuals.
I apologize.
when they are
Let me
part of
just
a
quickly,
political
what
institution.
I've done is I looked at Tamura, I looked up this subject, I looked at him going on the record saying stuff. So at least back in 2016, he says that education makes it so that women have at least one child, but less likely to have multiple children. In other words, yeah. So if that's what he says, we can go with that. So this is the point. Less likely
there's
to
a
have
quantity quality trade-off. There's also a precautionary demand for children dependent on the state of the economy and the state of like your income.
Exactly. And if you have a better economy, you're not going to want to have as many children.
Because you're not going to need to have as many children because the likelihood of them surviving past their infancy is much higher.
Okay, so this whole thing that we just spoke about, child survival, better off society, that this whole chapter of what we just said, you warned that a UBI, or I think Joe said, a UBI could lead to women having more children. And I'm saying there's many factors that mitigate against
Okay. You never let me flesh out my argument, by the way. I just want to point that out. And again, I'm not disagreeing with what that says. What I was stating is here, go to screen share. Let off screen share. Let me screen share.
you
Pull
want to
my
screen
big
share.
dick out.
Oh wait, you're not actually seeing my share, are you?
Yeah, I am.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So how do I stop it and give you the sharing ability?
Okay. Host participant screen sharing. Disabled screen sharing. Okay. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
I know, I'm trying to enable it, but
Oh my God, you're supposed to be a tech wizard.
just because I'm a tech wizard doesn't mean I know every program and how these
Oh
guys.
my God, it's Zoom. Teachers use this. Teachers, okay? These are people that get B's for their bachelor's degrees at best. Come on, man.
I guess I'm too cool for school.
I think, you know.
I can't find it. Okay, how do I even? Oh, I stopped this share. Got it. Okay, stop share.
Yep. Oh God, I see your face.
This whole time, huh? Okay.
Gross.
And
You have
now,
very pretty eyes, but you are not my type.
oh, you're into the eyes. I like that.
Yeah.
Who's got better eyes, Jeremy or me? Don't answer that.
Hey,
I don't know. Jeremy reminds me of my dad's eyes, so I kind of got to go with that.
Okay, man. I'm not jealous at all of that.
I mean, you should be. All right. So, okay, here we go. Share. All right. So this is a paper I wrote a
Should I
while
get it
back.
right?
This is the interplay of welfare and behavioral economics. All right. Pretty simple. So it's about this paper, The Behavioral Economics and Perverse Effects of the Welfare State by Brian Kaplan and Scott Alex Boulier. All right, Boulier. So this is what I was talking about the benefits with mates and about how risky behavior becomes increased through government intervention, and how that, you know, leads into this net loss that they didn't assume. And then this is the
What's with your formatting? Contention to self-control.
it's debate format.
Oh, okay.
See, this is how debates go. So you have arguments presented, section contention 1, judgmental bias, contention 2, self-control. You see how this builds upon what the self-control mechanism is.
Okay.
All right. And then 3, this is the evidence, right? So that's what we do. All right. So this is one of the biggest things I want to point out to everybody here. This comes from probably the largest study ever done on intelligence, and so comes from a military downsizing program, which, if no one knows, the military ran the longest and largest IQ test to date. They're still doing it. The ASVAB has a correlation with IQ test at like 0.75, right? So since the poor are below average on most of the standard measures of ability, including education and intelligence, we should expect their self-serving bias to be especially severe. Other research bears out this prediction. For examples find that that in the face of poor objective performance, underachieving Black children remain convinced that they are good in both math and science. All right, so that means the poor are overrepresented in their self-serving bias, and that also means that when you give them a plethora of choices, you increase the risk for them to make more bad choices. That's why there is a mechanism in governmental policy that says, all right, so we're going to give you money, but we're going to control it because we don't necessarily agree that what you'll do with that money is the best for you. Now, I know Milton Friedman said that nobody spends his money better than he does himself. To some extent, that's true, but this is well before what we kind of realized about, I guess you could say, about cognitive heuristics of individuals, right? And so looking at the current data and understanding behavioral and neuroeconomics, I don't find it reasonable just to assume that you can give the bottom 20% a large amount of money and that it will make them better.
I find that, by the way, just to say,
go ahead.
At first blush, I find that to be very similar to someone in the Chinese Communist Party saying, look, our social credit system is actually an advance. Like, you don't understand. You're not as advanced as we are in understanding how the mentality of a person works. And we've reduced crime by this much and that much, and people are more, with it. They say that, in fact, and that's what they're doing right now. How is this any different that you think the elites know better or how you're going to spend your money than the actual person?
Yes, we do. We actually do.
Sure of that before doing this.
Right, because we do, right? So here's another one.
I'm not right, I think, but go ahead.
So
that's not an argument because we do, because I said so. That's like the.
Well, I'm getting to the argument. I'm just trying to think of a better way to say this. So I've already parsed out and given you the evidence for why I think this is true, and I've given you the
Let's look at your
of why.
evidence one by one. Don't just dump it on me. So the first evidence is what? Summarize it. Is that the poor aren't able to make as good a choice as the rich?
Because they have lower IQ. So let's just start off with that. Fundamentally, those who are poor,
they have lower,
on average, have lower IQs.
They have lower effective IQ, and by that,
no, lower IQs. There's no such thing as effective and non-effective IQ. Whatever research you're reading, no.
Let me give you a specific example. Okay. First of all, okay, when you measure IQ, you typically give people a test, a standardized test of some kind, and then you get a number. Do we agree on that?
Okay, I mean, I do, but there's a lot more to it than that, but continue.
Okay, the methodology of measuring IQ typically involves something standardized, a test, and a number comes out. My point is, first of all, there are many factors that constantly change. Women, it used to be that they had lower IQ, as you say it, in the same sense. They had.
No, I didn't.
Okay, let me tell you. In the past, if you were to give a test to a woman who spent her entire life one way, and now women are spending their time differently. It's like a man who's transgender, let's say a man who became a trans woman, right? What happened was he grew the muscles and the bone structure, and now he competes against women, but his body's already.
Okay, but
I should say she, but you get the point. The point is that I'm okay with what they do in their own life, but there's consequences in their fitness also relative to people. Same thing here. Effective IQ. What do I mean? Nutrition matters. If you grew up with better nutrition, you're going to have better development.
Do you know the threat? Hold on. Do you know the thresholds of nutrition for increasing and decreasing IQ? Because I can tell you there's not a single place in America that has a decreasing nutritional deficit.
You're again only talking about America. It's very weird.
Why the hell would I be talking about anywhere else? This is specifically about American policy.
And by the way,
Yes.
America, you mean the United States. You don't mean Canada or South America.
I mean America. I mean the United States of America. Nobody else calls Canada America. They call it Canada.
What do you think South Americans call their continent?
Fucking probably shit. I don't know.
Hey guys, I'm struggling to stay awake. I'm
Yeah.
gonna ring off.
Yeah,
All right,
boys.
buddy.
I'm gonna let's limit this to another 10 minutes, and I gotta sleep too.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying this. We should
All right,
we
guys.
should do this a more regular thing. I think. What do you guys think?
See you, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'll see. I last thing I'll say. Next time, if we talk next time, let's talk about Biden's tax plan relative to Trump's tax plan. I saw you had that pulled up.
Well, hey, Jeremy, while I have you, can I ask you just a quick question, 1 minute question?
Yeah.
Hey, can you stop? Can I share my screen one more time? I'm going to share my screen, and Joe, I'm going to.
Yep.
Can I kick you off of sharing?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, how do I do that? I don't know. Can you just stop sharing it?
Here, I'll stop sharing. Hold on. Quit fucking with stuff.
Okay.
Stop. There you go.
Okay. So, Jeremy, look at my screen for a sec.
All right.
Here's two stories. I just want to get your take on it because that's how this whole argument or debate discussion started. I was pointing out that it's not left-wing socialists that are criticizing, they're saying that a democratic stimulus package is going to improve the economy more than Trump's tax cuts. It is, in fact, the people who study this for a living at Goldman Sachs and at Moody's. Here's Goldman Sachs chief economist saying that Biden's blue and Democrats would boost the economy essentially by redistributing money through a stimulus plan, essentially like a UBI. And then Moody's, independently of Goldman Sachs, says the same thing. These are the same Moody's that downgraded the United States thing. So I don't think they're just painting a rosy picture because they want Biden elected. I think they're literally have a reputation to uphold. And these guys are all saying then Biden's going to be better and his policy is going to be better than Trump.
They're using, they're not using good models. The models were probably not calibrated correctly. And they're also assuming that economic growth comes from demand side factors rather than supply side factors.
How is it that
business cycle mitigation generally culminates in demand side policies, right? Fiscal and monetary policy responses, right? Those trigger aggregate demand shocks. When it comes to long run economic growth, however, supply side shocks tend to explain more variance in real economic variables than demand side shocks do. So they should be using a growth model, whereas instead they're using a business cycle model. The guys at Moody's and the guys like at Goldman Sachs and all that, right, are very, very good with some business cycle models, but they probably don't know much about long run economic growth. Now, if you look at that Wall Street Journal paper or article that you had up, right, I've met one of the economists that wrote that, that wrote the study that is being written about. I think it was like a Hoover study or something. Mm-hmm. Casey Mulligan, he's a guy at Chicago, like brilliant fucking economist. I met the guy like 4 years ago. The guy's just fucking absolutely brilliant. The analysis that they use is much more conducive to actually answering the questions that are being asked about Biden's policy versus Trump's policy, because they're talking about growth. They're not talking about business cycle mitigation. They're not talking about pulling us out of a recession. It's talking about growth.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about growth. And I've been saying my contentions the whole time is the stronger the safety nets, the more redistribution you have, the better the growth. And yeah, maybe there's a Laffer curve somewhere in there. There's diminishing returns over time, sure, but we haven't hit those. And we should be sending a $1,200 check every month, a stimulus check. That would grow the economy much faster.
So that's getting into a business cycle argument, though. That business cycles and growth are totally different things.
Can I say something real quick? I just want to say something real quick. We were talking about Tamura and about Acemoglu. I want you, Gregory, to go look up Acemoglu. I think you'll really enjoy him. He's a neo-institutionalist. Institutionalism came from the school. It was an offshoot of a school of Marxism that kind of grew into what it is today. But I want you to take
Throw
this.
it in my Facebook. Throw it in my Facebook Messenger.
I will. All right. So one thing that AC Moglu had stated, and I take this as near golden. He said that growth in the United States would ultimately stop if the United States moved towards Scandinavian socialism.
Okay, go on. Why?
I mean, I can pull up what he said. Give me a second.
Okay. Because I think that having LLCs and limited liability increases the risk taking, which I think in that sense, risk taking is good. Being able to do a startup and failing is a good thing for people. Being able to innovate is good. You know, so
Innovation is what drives growth.
that's right. So
And
having
like I
more
said,
safety net.
as a growth economist, my two fields are basically in business cycles and growth, right? What I can tell you from the growth side is it is all supply side stuff that is driving economic growth.
So that's interesting. If I can just talk to Jeremy for 2 minutes, Joe, because he's got to leave. I have a few questions for you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
I've been an entrepreneur for at least 10 years. Okay. I've been an entrepreneur much longer. I just didn't have the company. Okay.
Yeah.
I've dealt with many people, many financiers, from, you know, lenders to investors, equity investors to VCs to whatever, right? Private equity. All across the board, they will tell you, if you Google it right now, they will say, like, what makes them invest, right? What do VCs look for, right? And of course, you need VCs because they, you know, pick winners and losers. They pour the, you know, the capital like the gasoline.
Yeah.
So what do they look for? I bet you if you look at any one of these things, they look for traction, right? They look for your product, the uptake of your product, and the hockey stick, right? More and more people getting your product. That's why Facebook, Twitter,
the probability of innovation occurring.
right. So here's my question to you.
Innovation is a supply side shock. It's not demand side.
Wait, but here's my question to you. If we agree that all of these investors are looking for your product being sold, right, before they invest, or at least interest to buy your product, right? They won't just give it to the money because they got a tax break. So here's my question to you. Where does that money come from, if not the disposable income of the average everyday American? Where else does it come from?
You have to have demand, yes. Like supply and demand are endogenous with each other. That's inarguable. But what I'm saying is the economic growth, right? Economic growth comes primarily from supply side factors, right?
I think demand side factors, because if you put money in the hands of everyday Americans, there is this concept called the marginal propensity to consume.
That's kind of a bullshit measure, by the way.
Agreed.
But I mean, if you have $10,000 a year, you're a student, you're making a stipend, which you guys may have done in your PhD program, then every time you go out and buy a pizza, or you're buying food, you're buying clothing, you're buying necessities, you're spending more of your overall salary on that than someone who is making $5 million a year. This is just an obvious argument. What is bullshit about that, you know?
So you're confusing the existence of demand with demand. Like, you're confusing the existence of demand with the fact that, like, government spending can somehow drive innovation, right? It doesn't. Innovation comes from production, right?
But production only.
Now there's endogeneity because the demand will be determining what stays, like what firms stay in business and what firms don't, right?
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
demand
Like the existence of demand matters.
Demand is what is primary, is what I'm arguing and saying, that if people are demanding a way to connect over long distances like we are, then people will step up and build it, but only if the people demanding have money. If people in Africa have no money to solve malaria, right? The payoff is small. But bald people have a lot of money to solve baldness. This is a Bill Gates argument. Then baldness will be solved before malaria. So demand drives supply. You see what I'm saying here?
I see what you're saying. That's part of the endogeneity that I was telling you about with demand. But what I am telling you is the economic growth literature, right? Whether you look at Tamura's theoretical works, whether you look at Acemoglu's theoretical works, if you look at the neoclassical growth model, you look at Romer's models from the 80s with endogenous growth on with perpetual growth. If you look at human capital investment models, right, all of them will suggest that the innovation comes from the supply side, right?
What do you mean? I'm just trying to understand, because it sounds like demand is what creates a supply. So ultimately the demand
does not create supply. Okay, so fundamentally, hold on. Let's take a fundamental look at demand creating supply. A demand cannot create a supply. There has to be something there to be demanded. That is just the nature of reality. I mean, I think this is Say's law, right? So
you're talking about induced demand. You're talking.
No. I'm talking. So like there can't be a demand for something.
Cars come to that
there
highway.
can't be a demand for something that does not exist. Therefore, supply has to come before demand.
No,
that's yes.
Like I'm telling you, as a growth economist, the overall consensus on what's driving growth is supply side factors. I promise you it is.
That's what I want to understand more. What makes you say that?
So let's say, I'll tell you what, because I am going to go to bed.
Just send me that research.
Read about the neoclassical growth model.
Hey, Joe, can you connect us on Facebook, and then we could just all.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
But I think you guys are talking about supply and demand. Basically, you're saying if I increase the lanes on a highway, more cars will come, and the highway will be just as clogged as before. You know?
No, that's not what we're saying.
What I'm saying is the innovation comes from how you, what the production process of the car is. If you produce a car more efficiently, right, that will spur on economic growth, because if you can produce something more efficiently, right, you're using fewer resources to produce.
That I agree with. And that competition drives that.
Yes.
So I agree with that.
Now,
okay.
And that's all you're saying. So I agree with that.
Jeremy, I'm gonna make a quote, and then me and you are gonna leave. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Greg. We'll try to do it again. I'm just gonna read this quote. This is from Acemoglu. I'm gonna send you this paper. You can look over it. It's rather dense.
Acemoglu, is he Japanese?
No.
He's like Turkish or something, I think.
He's Armenian, I think. Yeah. Okay. Armenian Turkish. Which, by the way, one of my favorite professors, Dr. Kanaz, he was from Turkey, and another one of my favorite professors, Dr. Oguz, was also from Turkey. I've had some great Turkish economists in my life. So this perspective therefore suggests that the diversity of institutions we observe among relatively advanced countries ranges from greater inequality and risk-taking in the United States to the more egalitarian society supported by a strong safety net in Scandinavia, rather than reflecting differences in fundamentals between citizens of these societies may emerge as a mutually self-reinforcing equilibrium. If so, in this equilibrium, we cannot all be like the Scandinavians, because Scandinavian capitalism depends in part on the knowledge spillovers created by the more cutthroat American capitalism. I think that kind of lends to the exact reason why we're saying what we're saying. It's like, yes, don't get it twisted. There does need to be safety nets. All of these things are true, but you also have to understand that these innovative processes, these things, they are spurned by the more cutthroat capitalism that we gain from America. And that's not to say that America is the most cutthroat capitalist, because we're not. There's a reason why the tiger nations of Asia had 6 to 9% growth, unlike the fake growth that you gained from China, until China in the 90s really actually picked up growth. And that's why you see other countries that are not adopting cutthroat capitalism having such slow amounts of growth. And then you can look into other developmental economists, outside of, Tamura and Acemoglu, and then you can go into the ones that I stated earlier for Easterly, and then
Well, Joe,
Gizman and Miguel.
I'll let you have the last word. I just really wanted to say this in 60 seconds, okay?
Mhm.
Because what you said right now, I disagree with a lot of it, and there's no time to really discuss, but I'll just say why, okay? Just like you guys have criticized Moody's and criticized the top banks in the world as being wrong, and so I'm entitled to criticize Acemoglu's, okay? Here's what I want to say. You can have a strong safety net, and you can have limited liability for companies, and you can have bankruptcy protections. If you want to see heartless capitalism, rugged capitalism, like I said, debtors' prisons, okay, the Irish potato famine, the British Raj, maybe a statism, but the point is, that's the kind of capitalism we do not any longer have. We have bankruptcy protections. We don't have debtors' prisons. And the fact that if Scandinavia wanted to have LLCs and have these corporations, which libertarians say is a creation of the state, that's a good thing, because then people could take risks. So these are not mutually independent things. And the United States is far, far, far from being more cutthroat capitalist. It just doesn't have a good safety net. And in fact, having a good safety net would enable more people, more, not less, to sit at home and contribute to open source software, science, hobbies, and Quentin Tarantino can become a filmmaker. So in fact, no, safety nets go hand in hand with limited liability and bankruptcy protection as something that increases the ability to have risks, which is what you said Scandinavia lacks. But not because they have the safety nets, but they can also have the limited liability culture, which they don't. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not one or the other. That's my opinion. I'll give you the last word for all this. What do you think?
I mean, there's a lot in there to discuss, and someday we'll get to it soon. I think it's a good topic to talk about. And I want you to understand the reason why I had the perspective that I do. Again, I grew up a communist. I grew up poor. I grew up poorer than most people in the United States could imagine. I didn't have food growing up very often. When I joined the army, I was 6 foot, 135 pounds. All right. Like, I was skin and bones.
Wow.
Like, looked on the border of death.
Oh,
I used
wow.
to have to go to churches to get food. And then, the idea of like eating moldy bread and stuff like that was like really heart-wrenching and was real. And I actually felt that, and I understood what it was like to be that poor. I've also lived in third world countries, and I've understood what it's like to being poor over there. And I understood that the difficulties that they have in their own economic growth. That's why I fight so hard for what I do, and why I believe in so wholeheartedly of what I do. I've seen the world from the other side. I've had both perspectives. I promise you. It's not that I'm biased. I've come to these conclusions through, I guess you could say, my perception, as well as what I've seen work. I've seen countries that have done this type of goal. I've seen countries that have gotten billions in foreign aid and have never had a bit of growth to them, because instead of actually caring, people just throw money at them and expect it to make the world a better place. And that's not the way it works. Because what would happen? This money would get funneled into bad systems. It would be bribed, pushed out. A dictator would come over there and take over. And all of that was a significant fucking problem that no one would wanted to deal with, except for the rich white elites, who would sit there and worry about their own guilt and their own problems and never care for anyone other than what they thought themselves was best. And I know I said earlier that I disagreed that poor people ought not be given choices. I mean that specifically with regards to choices for goods. I don't want poor people to be removed from choices that they have to be a capitalist. I don't want poor people removed from the choice to go out and to do these things. I don't want that. And I understand that you think that the social safety net would make that a better place, but I don't think that it would. I think the hardships that I had to deal with created the person that I am now, where I am mildly successful. I've built up from the bottom. I've come from the trailer park. I now have, a house, 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath with a basement, a half acre of land, and all of this I've built myself. I've had to work, 60, 70 hours a week.
Hey
I'm
guys,
doing,
I'm
I'm
out.
working.
My cats are getting ridiculously hard to deal with, so I got to dip.
I love you, Jeremy. I'll talk to you.
Jeremy.
Uh,
That's
And
really,
so,
that's really, I didn't know that about you, man.
so when I say these things, I don't mean, and that's why I'm also so brutal on Facebook and stuff like that, mainly because I think it's fun to mess around with people. And I really do feel the way I do because I've seen the world from multiple perspectives. And that's the way, that's why I'm so passionate about the things that I've done. Because at the end of the day, working for the government and then working in other places and doing all the things that I've done, I've seen the amount of corruption. I've seen the amount of issues. If you want more government control, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
I don't.
I,
I'm libertarian. So.
yeah, I know you're a libertarian. And I know I said that I'm a right-wing authoritarian, and I meant that with social issues. I want enforcement on, I'll give you a perfect example. This is a simple example. It's called enforced monogamy. It's something, it's a term used in what is that called? I've had too many beers tonight. Anthropology. And it's basically saying that society sets up goals and reasons for people to be married and stay married. So it enforces monogamy despite, I guess, our better beliefs and our own perversions and persuasions to be non-monogamous. And so in a world that we can create these incentive structures that make things better without the use of nudges, because I think that's a moral line that I'm not sure how I feel about it. And I don't think Thaler really felt as keen about it as he did, because it does move into kind of like the mind control thing. Which, if you ever read Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, that kind of goes into the way I think that society will move with more nudges. And whenever I give you a hard time on Facebook and any of these other people, I just want you to know, don't take it personal. I take the piss out of everybody.
This
As
is
you can
what
tell,
I enjoy. I wish, look, I joined the group because I thought we would have video discussion. And then,
same.
yeah. And then it just got canceled because those guys, well, guess what? I'm going to make some website with video discussions, and then we're all going to hang out on it. So,
I'm absolutely okay with that. And I'm willing to have a good conversation. I'm willing to talk with people, and I'm willing to do things. But I really, really hate the Facebook group and what it's become. I don't find it very good. I don't find it very useful. And the only time I get on there is to either make fun of Kim, you, or Alex, or Michael, because that's all that's ever on there. It's you same four people bickering with each other. That cannot be healthy. That cannot be healthy for your mental state. Like, I'm just going to be honest. I don't think anybody in that group is mentally healthy going in or going out of that conversation. And that's the reason why I give y'all such a hard time. And truly, if you want to know the truth, I wish all of y'all would stop, because I don't think it's very good, and I don't think it
I
leads
agree.
any
Like,
good discussion.
first of all, Kim I ignore because I don't know that guy, like what he barely makes any points. He just like copy paste stuff and says stuff. I don't know. But then Michael is like one step removed from Kim, and he sort of has logic, and so I can speak to him. He's very biased, but he has, like, I haven't seen him be like Kim. Like, Kim just rambles. He just
Kim rambles. I'll give Michael the benefit of the doubt. I've actually probably cussed out Michael more than any human being. There actually was a few guys, I don't know, they still might comment. They've got me blocked. One was, his name was Thomas. He was a lawyer. I called him fat because he called me a drunk. Because I used to get on some of the streams with some of the guys and have a few beers, and he told me that I had a drinking problem and I should get my child removed from me. And I called him fat, and I'm an evil human being because he struggles with his weight. And it's just like, well, what if I struggle with the drinking? You think it's okay to make that comment, but I can't make one about your weight? You're a hypocrite. And so, you know, it is what it is on that group, and it's a fucking annoying thing. But at the end of the day, I'm a nice person. I do like to talk. I do enjoy this. And I'd like to thank you for this. This gave me drive and motivation. I actually had to sit down and think about this. You may not think that I don't think about it because I give you an answer, but I've also been debating for a long time. So it's not above me to have an answer readily available, but that doesn't mean that I always necessarily agree with my position. That's just the position that I'm going to bring, because that's what I think has the most fruit in the counter argument, right? So, like, do I believe women shouldn't have the vote? No. No, I don't believe that women should not have the vote. I think women should have the vote. I think every human being should have the vote. But at the end of the day, I'm more than willing to debate about the idea. I think the idea is debatable. Just like I don't think every person should have the debate. I think that's a debatable idea. I think only
By the way,
property
it's
owners.
interesting why women vote the way they do. Maybe half of humanity has a perspective.
Well,
that-
yeah, I mean, they do have a perspective, and it's a biological constraint that they have, that they're
Amen.
child rearing, that their brains are more molded towards social interactions. They're
Sure.
more cohort
that's true.
based.
Well, yeah, but the point is that's part of the human condition.
Absolutely, and I'm not opposed to that. No, I don't. No, so I'll give you an example. I think Jordan Peterson catches a bad rap from the left, and I think he actually agrees more with the left than they give him credit for. But what he said, he's the defender of the conservatism, but he's only a defender of the conservatism in what is useful, right? Just like he's the defender of liberalism and progressivism in so much as it is useful. And at the end of the day, if everyone was a conservative, the world would be a terrible, terrible place, and nothing would get done through the bureaucratic mess, and then nothing would progress because we would maintain only the hold that we have. And I don't think that that's very good. I don't think that's good at all. That's evil. It's terrible. It's Nazi Germany. On the flip side, you can't have progression for the sake of progression. I don't think that that's useful either. I think progression has to be inhibited by some level of tradition. You have to be able to test things. So I used to do Jungian analysis. That's why when you were talking about IQ, my secondary in my undergraduate and a lot of my actual work study was in behavioral and personality. So behavioral economics and personality psychology. The personality psychology had a segue into Jungian stuff because I actually had a professor that was a Jungian, which he would never admit to, but he was a Jungian. And he was one of the only clinical psychologists on the East Coast, real clinical psychologists on the East Coast in America, in the United States. And I went through a lot with him, and I wrote a lot of pieces. And one of the main points was, my specific paper was on the story of Finn and Oizen. And it was really the story of a son trying to progress past his father, and his father, if you take it as the archetype, this is culture, how culture changes, but culture has to be inhibited by the tradition to see what works and what doesn't. Because if you have change, you don't know if all of the things that change will actually work. So it has to be inhibited by things that works. And then you have to slowly implement them in, because if you progress for progress sake, then you end up, I use
agree with you
this.
on that. And in many ways, I'm socially a conservative in that I like family values and taking care of the kids and educating your kids. I don't have a position about what genders or whatever, but I'm just saying, like, I'd rather see people work less for corporations and spend more time with their kids, which is another reason why I want UBI. I feel that social redistribution of wealth leads to more conservative family values. It's, for me, it's all a holistic thing.
Yeah. And I could see, again, like I said, I can understand the arguments made in that presentation. Like, I don't disagree with that entirely. But like I said, everything has to be inhibited by what we know works. We know what works. We know what is working right now. Any exogenous shock to it could have very strong unintended consequences. And so I'm the vanguard. It's my job to say, no, we don't need to change. Now, even if I agree that we do need change, I'm still going to say that we don't need change, specifically to keep change from happening so much, right? And I think that's the job of the conservative. And the job of the progressive is to progress. It's just the way it is. And at the end of the day, when those two things hit equilibrium, the world's a better place. But so long as you have A or B in control, I don't think it's a good equilibrium. And that's kind of
I agree with you on that. Let's leave it at that. I think that was a good place to leave that discussion.
Yeah.
Man, I really enjoyed this. We got to do this again. It gave me a little bit of a break also.
Same.
2 o'clock in the morning or something. No,
Yeah,
it's 1:30 in the morning. All right.
You have a good one, bud.
Yeah, you too, man. Bye.